Oh, if it were only so, if to see Tim Walz and Jacob Fry in orange jumpsuits. It's a nightmare out there. This is some show today. Welcome everybody to the front line with Joe and Joe. Sunday morning, I got on my collared shirt, Joe. I'm about to. I guess I call this my Sunday best. I ought to put on a tie for the Lord, and go to mass. But we got to get Joe and Joe in early on a Sunday morning. I hope everybody out there, if you're a football fan, is rooting for the Denver Broncos, because if there's one thing that Joe and I do not want to see is the Patriots in the Super Bowl again. Having said that, we are going into the breach Sunday morning. Please, wherever you're watching this, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. We got a lot of stuff going on this week. You got Minneapolis looks like Vietnam, Joe, in the 1960s. It looks like something out of like Full Metal Jacket. If you remember, like the scenes in Way City, with those battles with the smoke and the destruction and everything else. And we got to talk about it because it's serious. I think Lutnick went to. I mean, we got some Davos clips to cover. You got Lutnick. Really, like I was fairly impressed with Lutnick, and the way he's got the oligarchs all around him. And he's talking about the problems of globalization, which maybe Lutnick's been watching the front line with Joe and Joe. I don't know. Maybe he's sneaking it on the side because the administration, they don't want people to act, to publicly know they're watching a couple of Goombas from New Jersey. We're going to talk about. Larry Fink to me is a dangerous guy.
Oh,
we're going to talk about
in
that too.
prison.
He's Dr. Evil. Remember in Austin Powers?
Prison.
He's like this because he wants to unify everything on a blockchain. And guess for what reason, Larry? Because you want to control it.
Dude, well, I have a lot to say about that, but we'll talk about it.
And we're going to get into that. And then we're obviously got to talk about Canada. That's usually we have a lot of clips we put up on particularly our Facebook page about Canada. A lot of our audience are Canadian brothers and sisters. And we love Canada. But guess what? Canada's about to become a threat. And it's because of Mark Carney. Dougie Ford, he's always good for a couple of clips. Hey, listen, I like the guy. I like Doug Ford. Because guess what? Love him or hate him, disagree with him sometimes, not agree with him sometimes. But the guy calls it the way it is. And a black radical, a guy who I don't like. We're going to show you a clip from that in a little while. A black radical talking about something that many people, Joe and I, have been talking about it.
Oh, dude, he gets it. He gets it.
In other words, black people in America, Donald Trump asked you, what do you have to lose? Okay. And here's a guy saying, basically bringing that question to fulfillment because he's talking about how you want to talk about white replacement theory. Well, guess who's being replaced? Black Americans are being replaced.
He gets it, Joe. I'm going to be honest with you. That is that's such an important conversation that the African-American community has to pay attention to because it's reality. They're living in a delusion right now, and it's happening right in front of their eyes. They are being replaced. We've been covering this for years with conversations in basically town hall meetings in Chicago and in the Bronx.
If you have a black American, like we're going to show you, I forgot his name, but that we're going to show you, and that guy comes to the table, you know why I'd be willing to talk to him, even though I think he said in the past a lot of things I don't like, is because I know that he is not a slave to the Democrat Party. And that guy I actually could talk to. The black Uncle Tom liberal establishment can't talk to those people.
Well, it's their identity. They have to shake it. It's like white people blue-collar white people from New Jersey. It's indoctrination, decade after decade, generation after generation. I'm a Democrat. My grandfather was a union carpenter. This is not that party anymore.
That's right.
See, this is what people have to understand. It's no longer about Republicans and Democrats. It's about, frankly, right now, good and evil.
That's true. That's right.
And that does not mean that Donald Trump is a saint. What it means is you either believe in the American experiment or you don't. It's not a Republican or Democrat conversation anymore. And people have to understand that. You're simply being used. Listen, and that is the truth.
Michael Jones has pointed out a number of times, right? Got in a little trouble for it. But then again, that guy's used to getting into trouble. He pointed out a couple of times, the Democrat Party, when you have a black conservative or a black leftist like this guy, okay, the Democrat Party's immediate response is put your chain back on and then uses the N-word. In other words, put your chain back on.
Well, Obama did that during the election.
Exactly right. He said, well, the brothers ain't coming out to vote. But let's save that. We're going to talk about that more. And then finally at the end, we have a clip from the Joe Rogan show talking about the real Zelensky.
That is a really informative clip that people should pay attention to, because to be honest with you, it also shows, and this is what I want to highlight with that particular clip, the corruption of the war machine in the United States, as well as the mainstream media that sold America a narrative which was completely false. And that clip blows that narrative out of the water.
And we gotta make sure that we scream from the rooftops. If Donald Trump is going to do it, because Donald Trump's doing a lot lately, and we won't get into it on today's show at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, doing a lot to piss me off. Okay, but one thing that's got to happen is no more money for Ukraine. But anyway, and we'll talk about why, because Zelensky's a little grifter. That's all he is. And Joe and I are from New Jersey, so we know a little bit about grifters. But here, let's go to Minneapolis.
This is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
Yeah. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus, because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world, is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me, though.
We're here to worship Jesus.
Yes.
That's why we're here.
Yes.
Okay. That's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a Christian?
No one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always.
Do you see what's going on in this place? Let's start with the second part of that, and then we'll go to the first. I got a comment about Don Lemon. He's lucky that pastor is more Christian than me. He really is, because I wouldn't have been so nice as that and Christian-like and Christ-like as that pastor. I would have said, if you don't get your people out of here in about 3 minutes, if you don't start walking them out, I'm going to walk you out and every man in this way. The problem is, see, they picked their spot. And if you looked, it wasn't a crowded church. There were women and children there. They knew exactly what they were doing. And I actually am wrong for what I'm saying. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to throw it over to you. Because my reaction, because I am a hothead, my reaction is exactly what they would have wanted. You know what I mean, Joe? They did that because they're provocateurs. They are leftist agitator provocateurs is what they are. Don Lemon calling himself a Christian is a joke. Okay, I did a video on this during the week, and I took it down because I had to reflect, and I said, nope, I let my anger get the best of me, and it's not a good video to keep up because I was a little bit too angry in it. But the anger is justified because these people know exactly what they're doing, especially when they're targeting a place where there's women and children. And if you go by the first clip, and you'll get into the news over the weekend, another person got shot. But that person, that loving, sweet person who just wanted to serve the poor, went to where ICE is armed with a gun.
And actually tried to pull it out. It's on
What
video.
do you think is going, if you're smart, if you have any intelligence whatsoever, what do you think is going to happen to you if you're in the middle of a bunch of law enforcement officers, and that's what they are, and you pull out a gun? What do you think the result is going to be? And as I said last time, Joe, when we talked about the woman who got shot, who tried to run over the ICE agent, about the Antifa kid who Kyle Rittenhouse shot, my view is the same in all cases. You wasted your life for nothing. You died for nothing. The people that sent you out there actually sent you out there to die so that they can have a martyr. Joe, it's a mess. I need your help.
First, the church incident, which took place last week, that was a disgrace. The only mistake that pastor said, this is a shame. You should be ashamed. There is no shame.
Right.
You're talking to delusional people. Their reality is twisted. The gentleman, one of the gentlemen who's been seen in other riots, they showed a clip. I think his name's Kelly. He has a beard. He was completely off the hinges talking. He was arrested this week, which is good. Literally, if you listen to that man, there is no talking to him. He is completely living in an alternative universe. He actually believes in his mind he is a freedom fighter in his mind. And many of these people actually believe that. That's why, sadly, Joe, they're going to die.
Yeah.
This is when you do something like this, you confront a police officer and you are armed, you are going to die in any state, in any place, in any situation. And to think you're not living in reality. And that's where we're at. And that's why that gentleman got shot. Do you know, I saw the news this morning, the Democrats are planning to shut the government down as a result of that shooting.
Yeah.
They should condemn the actions of these people. These are the people for 18 months talked about January 6th. January 6th was a fraternity stunt compared to what's going on in Minneapolis right now. People are dying. 2 have been killed, and it's only the beginning. You have to turn the rhetoric down. Jacob Fry and Tim Walsh should be arrested. Now, why aren't they being arrested? Because they are going into the midterms, and Donald Trump is not trying to be. He's walking that fine line. He doesn't want to cause basically an uproar and have their base unite. That's why he's kind of letting them basically hang themselves and allow the American people to decide, is this what we want? Is this the country? Are these the people who we basically have under the umbrella of we are all Americans? The answer clearly is no.
Right.
These people do not believe in the American founding. They simply don't. And any rule that's put in front of them is viewed as you're a fascist. No, you cannot have society based on no rules. Sorry. And at the end of the day, you're in the wrong. You're simply in the wrong. Now, is Donald Trump perfect? No, absolutely not. But you are in the wrong. And this is going to get ugly, Joe Pasillo. And it's only the beginning.
It is only the beginning. Does it strike you as odd, or are you shocked to find out that all of this, you could pull the line from All the President's Men, all right, the movie about Watergate, okay? Follow the money. Joe, why did they do this in Minnesota? Why are they doing this all over the country? It was a big grift.
It's a power move, Joe. They need this is what a lot of the people in the streets, maybe they do understand it. They let these people in to create a voting bloc. That is the only reason why 10 to 20 million undocumented people came into America. It was to replace the Latinos and the African Americans who are not, and we're going to talk about this later, as reliable. We saw that in the last election, and the Democratic strategists knew that. So they brought in a group of people. That's what happened in Europe. It's the playbook. And frankly, and we're going to talk more, that's what E. Michael Jones wrote about in The Slaughter of Cities. Basically, the Catholic voting bloc who lived in cities had to be replaced and pushed out into the peripherals of the city. So what did they do? They brought in poor Southern blacks and they put them on welfare to dilute the Catholic vote. That is what happened. And the irony is now they're doing it to the African Americans in the city, in front of your eyes.
But a lot of African Americans, and we'll get into it later, are waking up. So
they are, but
remember,
not
this is little by little, all right. And you never know that like you said, there's a lot of people they could switch on a dime, especially when we'll play the clip in a little while when they realize the truth of these things. But you mentioned power, but when you look at the suitcases full of money, when you look at Nick Shirley going to these so-called daycare centers and everything else, they don't have one kid in them. It is power. But then again, it's always money. It's power and money. And Jacob Fry and Tim Walz, I mean, listen, when your best response is get the F out of Minneapolis to ICE or Nick Shirley's a white supremacist, then we know that you really don't have anything. But remember, this is the playbook of the oligarchs. This is what they want. So interestingly enough, and if you're just joining us, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossanello. Please share this video. Please take a second and share the video and like our videos. Help us get out to a wider audience. We love you very much, and we appreciate your support every week. We have a good crowd coming. We have over 60 right now in our comment room. So and we're monitoring the comments. So please feel free to start chattering and give us even tell us if you disagree with us. But underlying it all is the battle between globalism, global elites, as we always say, and just regular people. We see that. I think it's fair to say you saw that with Brexit. You saw that with the Yellow Jackets in France. You saw that with the trucker convoy in Canada. You saw that with the election of Trump and the emergence of this America First movement, the MAGA movement in America. People are fed up. The central thing they're fed up with is centralized control of the world, not just your country, of the world. So here's Howard Lutnick.
Well, I think you should start at a much higher level. Okay? We are in Davos at the World Economic Forum. And the Trump administration and myself, we are here to make a very clear point. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. It is what the WEF has stood for, which is export, offshore, far shore, find the cheapest labor in the world, and the world is a better place for it. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind. And what we are here to say is that America First is a different model, one that we encourage other countries to consider, which is that our workers come first. We can have policies that impact our workers. Sovereignty is your borders. You're entitled to have borders. You shouldn't offshore your medicine. You shouldn't offshore your semiconductors. You shouldn't offshore your entire industrial base and have it be hollowed out beneath you. You should not be dependent for that which is fundamental to your sovereignty on any other nation. And if you're going to be dependent on someone, it darn well better be your best allies. Okay? And so that is a different way of thinking. It is completely different than the WEF. I viewed the WEF as not a flagpole in the middle, but in fact, they are the flag. Whichever way the wind blew, so it blew. You should have solar, you should have wind. Why are you going to do solar and wind? Why would Europe agree to be net zero in 2030 when they don't make a battery? They don't make a battery. So if they go 2030, they are deciding to be subservient to China, who makes the batteries.
I mean, to me, it makes all the sense in the world. I did want to post that Perry's in the chat room along with a lot of our other friends. Perry says the belief that a group of billionaires are suddenly working tirelessly for the benefit of the working class really does require a spectacular level of stupid. But here's the thing, Perry. We've all been at that spectacular level of stupid in our lives, because I remember, full disclosure, I remember back in the day, I thought I kind of drunk the Kool-Aid a little bit. In other words, I thought in my mind, well, you know what? I mean, we should try to raise the standard of living of other countries, and we should try to have more global trade and a little bit more equity. Okay, that was a level of stupidity, Perry, that I was at. But then you quickly realize, here's the problem, Joe, and then I'm going to throw it over to you. It sounds good. Right? It sounds good. We're all going to sing Kumbaya. We're all going to sit around together and we're all just going to get along. Here's the problem. God created nations because there are different kinds of people. And some people just don't, they like to congregate with other people who they either think like, look like, believe like, talk like, whatever the case might be. Now, I'm not saying we can't be friends and have friendly, good trading relationships with other countries. Okay. But the idea of this globalism, The problem with it is the people who set the rules rigged the whole game for themselves. It had nothing to do, as Perry said, it had nothing to do with helping working class people or poor people. It had to do with exploiting as much of the world's resources on a global scale that they possibly can and making America a lapdog to that system. And their problem with Trump, okay, because we're going to talk about it in a little bit, their problem with Trump is Trump's using every lever he can to try to, as Lutnick pointed out about offshoring and all that, he's using every lever he can to try to pull us out of that system in the way that it's developed over the course of the last, I don't know how long, 50, 60 years at least. Joe, I'll throw it over to you.
That statement was arguably the best thing that I have heard since Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. No question about it. That statement absolutely is not only common sense, not only is it spot on, but that statement will benefit regular people more than anything else that has been said since.
Right.
Because the ideology of globalism, which the WEF began in 1971, was nothing more than a group of very powerful people, the most powerful people, to consolidate the world's power and create a feudalism-like structure which benefits the few and enslaves the many.
Right.
And any person who votes for that and is not in the few, and none of you are.
Yeah.
I don't know a soul who is. That we're talking about people who run companies. That's the few.
Right.
You're crazy.
You're
because
right.
it's not about you, and they're using you. What we saw in Minneapolis, they're nothing more than tools of that ideology. What we're seeing in Canada, because Carney is a disciple of that group of people, is exactly what is happening to our friends in Canada. And sadly, you empowered Mark Carney. You got distracted by Donald Trump's rhetoric, and he has destroyed you, as did Justin Trudeau.
That's right.
And this is exactly what we have to go away from, regular people. And this is why in America, it's not about Republican and Democrat anymore. If you think that it is, you're not paying attention, because ultimately what has happened to these countries, Canada, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, they have been gutted by that organization. They have consolidated power and they took your power away. That is reality, people.
That's right.
And we have to go away from that. There is nothing wrong than being proud of your nation. There is nothing wrong being proud to be Polish, be proud to be Hungarian, be proud to be French, and take care of your own first. That is not what that organization is about.
Right. No, it's not.
And if you think otherwise, and if you support that for any other reason, you are not living in reality.
Well, here's the reality. I mean, listen, people might say, well, these are small examples, but you had over the last, I mean, we've covered it on the show several times, like some of the measures that they try to impose, because remember something, you're talking about a globalist organization. You're talking about the World Economic Forum. You're talking about the Klaus Schwabs of the world. We're about to play Larry Fink in a minute. That's all they're about is control. And there's examples of, like, I would ask somebody like somebody who would think that with what we're saying is is conservative in some way. It's common sense.
It's common sense, Joe.
It
has nothing to do with conservative. Nothing.
Nothing to do with political labels or anything like that. The Republicans, I voted Republican. I've always voted Republican. They stab us in the back a million times. We'd have to have a 10-hour show to talk about how the Republicans have stabbed us in the back. But the bottom line is this. When they tell you in Europe that you can only use your hair dryer certain nights of the week, what do you think is going on?
Dude, in Europe, they were telling people they couldn't heat their home.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what do you think? I got a shiver. I got a shiver in my house. My kids got to have to be cold in my house. If I have enough money to pay for gas in my house to heat my home, I got to somehow feel guilty of that because Klaus Schwab and Larry Fink and the rest of the globalists, they say, well, you're being really selfish when you're burning that energy. I'm cold. I was living in New Jersey, or I live in Detroit, or I lived in Canada, or I live in a cold place in the world. I need oil to burn. I need to be able to heat my home. You're being very selfish. So you're going to tell me that's just an example. You're going to tell me that if I gripe about that, somehow I don't care about the planet. Okay, I care about my kids. I care about my wife. I care about the fact that
they
I'm
don't care
freezing
about
my
their
ass off.
kids. They have said this. This is what another thing that people, and I invite people to little shout out to Promethean Action. It's a very, very informative group of people. It's a think tank that kind of breaks down a lot of what the WEF has been doing for a long time. Check them out. Ultimately, the WEF, it's anti-human. They have said this time and time again. There are too many people on this planet. They want a number. It's been said time and time again, 500,000 people.
500 million.
So 500 million. Sorry. So ultimately, what are you going to do with the other 8.5 billion? Ultimately, their structures are anti-family, anti-human,
and anti-God.
Well, that's a given. And that means you. That means you. And this is what I'm saying. They're creating feudalism 2.0. You will own nothing. Right. You will own nothing. And this is the goal. And if you, to be honest with you, under whatever political identity you call yourself, support that, you are enabling people to slit your throat.
Right.
To hurt your family.
That's right.
And this is reality. And it's been done. It's being done. They're anti-family. They're anti-children. They're anti-human.
Joe, you're
Joe, this is like I bang my head against the wall when you hear working class people who frankly are hypnotized by the mainstream media and or are deluded by absolute and utter hatred of Donald Trump that they will vote against their own interests.
That's right. And let me tell you what's not in your interest. Underlying this all, what's not in your interest is giving these people the power to control your every. Now, this is not, oh, we have power, we control most of it. This is controlling every aspect of your life. And they're telling.
I think the movement towards tokenization, decimalization is necessary. It's ironic that we see two emerging countries leading the world in in the tokenization and digitization of their currency. That's Brazil and India. I think we need to move very rapidly to doing that. We would be reducing fees. We would do more democratization by reducing more fees if we had all investments on a tokenized platform that you could move from a tokenized money market fund to equities and bonds and back and forth. We have one common blockchain. We will, we could reduce corruption. So I would argue that yes, we have more dependencies on maybe one blockchain, which we could all talk about. But that being said, the activities are probably processed and more secure than ever.
There is so much to unpack when it comes to what happened this week in Davos. I think it was probably one of the most important sessions that they've had since their inception in 1971. But one thing that I wanted to share with the posse is the fact that a lot of attention was paid to the sort of geopolitical reshuffling and, this new world order and the changes to this new world order and what that entails. But there is one thing that I think is very important and we mustn't lose sight of is the fact that in the background, parallel to the AI focus, the topic of many, many of the panels this week was actually on the economics and the new, quote, financial reset that they've been preparing and building out for many years. And so I just want to read a couple of the panel's titles to give a little bit of context to what I'm saying. So you have, is tokenization the future? Where are we on stable coins? A new era for finance, banking accelerated, central banking beyond the mandate. And so what we are seeing is all these heads of central banks, like Christine Lagarde of the ECB, IMF head, WTO head, and various international financial institutions getting together, having these conversations, especially with Larry Fink, the new mayor in town, the co-interim chair, leading many of these discussions. And what we have to understand is that there is this reset that is coming, this 100% digitalization of the entire financial structure. I mean, we're quasi entirely digitized when it comes to our financial services and the financial system, but we're talking about a 100% digitalization with CBDCs, with stable coins coming. And this is a topic that is very dear, especially to Larry Fink, who has been pushing tokenization extremely hard over the last few years.
That's all you need to hear. I want Larry Fink controlling the currency. I want Larry Fink controlling all transactions, real estate, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, currency, all of it. And he's going like this. He's kind of like almost wagging his finger. Why do people think in their minds, just because somebody has a lot of money and they're powerful, that they actually think that we're so stupid that we can't see what they're trying to do?
The problem is, are people listening to that, Joe? You see,
absolutely.
No,
absolutely.
but like it's not on the mainstream media. You see, that man is telling us the playbook. And I want to kind of bring this out because this woman who was talking to Steve Bannon also is saying this in her basic conversation. The conversation has shifted. Why? The global, if you follow this as I have for quite some time, the main focus of the conversation was net zero carbon, climate. Well, Donald Trump just blew a massive hole in that narrative. That's very important. Donald Trump just marched into Davos and blew a massive hole in their strategy. So now they're pivoting. The new pivot is blockchain. And Larry Fink is explaining to the simple people why it's good for you.
Right.
When in fact, it's the same strategy. It's just a pivot because he realizes that Donald Trump just torpedoed the plan. As Lutnick said, you're like the wind. First go into solar, then go into this, then go into that. They were lying. It was nothing more than a distraction, and now it's a pivot. The end game is the same: to unify the elite and powers of the world and ultimately create a feudal system. Notice he said it limits corruption. Wrong. It increases corruption. It takes your power. It also controls you.
Right.
Digital currency is a means of control because ultimately conversations like this will cease. Why? Because all they have to do is press a button and delete you. That's what we saw in Canada with the truckers.
Right.
They literally froze their money. We even saw that in America with certain people who were no longer allowed to bank at certain international banks.
Right.
That is the power of digital currency. And notice, I think, who was interviewing him? Sorkin? Is that dude from the New York Times who was interviewing Larry Fink? I can't recall his name. Dude, he was laughing. Did you see the smirk on his face?
Right.
He knows. He knows. It's not even a good lie, Larry.
I knew that 1 second he was going to turn around and say, "We know who you are, Dr. Evil."
100%. Larry Fink is a charlatan. And any person, again, if your political ideology supports that of Larry Fink, dude, you don't get it. I'll be honest with you. You just simply, if your hatred for Donald Trump allows Larry Fink to get into your life and affect your family, as it did in Canada, that's what Mark Carney masterfully did. He pivoted your financial hardship away from your mind to Donald Trump. Well, that's what's happening in America. Larry Fink, and that's what Joe Biden was all about with the Paris Accord. That's what what's his face in the UK? What's that? guy's
Keir
name.
Starmer or Boris
Way
Johnson?
before him. Way before him.
Tony Blair?
Tony Blair did. That's what George Bush was about. We
Right.
have to go away from that. And
Right.
again, it's as simple as, do you want to have your own autonomy in this world as we have always had in America? Because if you do, you have to oppose what Larry Fink says. I mean, it's just as simple as that,
No,
Joe.
the problem is, and I told you, I know it's anecdotal, but I've told you before, I've had conversations in my life with people who, yes, are on the political left, who have told me straight up, I would love to have a place where I don't have to have any responsibility. In other words, where all I have to do is
What
just.
world do you live in? Joe,
Well,
that's not being an adult.
well,
You're
that's
not
the
an
thing.
adult. That doesn't exist.
Well, they're trying. Listen, they can't sell you chains because you'll look at the chains and say, any human being would say, well, I don't want chains. So they have to make the chains look like something that's actually going to be liberated.
Well, that's what the devil does. I mean,
Yeah.
this is like what I'm saying. Like we have to be an adult. This isn't heaven. And it's never going to be. And any government that basically sells you this idea of heaven on earth has never succeeded.
No.
Ever. Look at history. So no one's going to take care of you. This is not the way it works. You're not an adult. If you think like that, you're not an adult.
Well, that's why we have to be, and we're going to move on to Mark Carney. You're joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. That's why we have to be louder than these people. And we have to be, again, my hothead in this wants to tell people who think like the person I just described to you, wants to say, why don't you just shut up? Or why don't you wake up? And if you're not going to wake up, then shut up. I don't want to be that guy. I would try to convince those people, look, if you think that these people, if you think Larry Fink and I know Klaus Schwab's not the head anymore, but he's the perfect person to put up there. Him and Yuval Harari, that guy's evil. That guy is
He's just
evil.
lost and wounded.
No, he's not lost. I'm sorry, Joe. I don't mean to do that. He knows exactly what he's doing. Yuval Harari thinks AI is going to take the place of God and the Bible. That's how far off the deep end that guy is. But let's go to a guy that's close to home for a lot of our people here at the front line with Joe and Joe, Mr. Mark Carney.
We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful, and American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals, and we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
I don't know. Maybe I said Yuval Harari is really evil. All right. I wonder if I need to redirect that to Mark Carney. Who the heck is he talking about? No, it's tariffs as leverage. Yes, Mr. Carney. Here's the reason why. Not because globalism works. Because as we pointed out earlier in the show at the front line with Joe and Joe, because globalism is just a rigged game. It's all to keep you people in power and wealthy and everything else. That's why we're using tariffs as leverage and all the other things that he mentioned. You're offering people chains when people don't want their chains anymore. And we elect a guy like Donald Trump who wants to get those chains, at least on the economic front, get those chains off of me. Then you say, well, these countries are acting a little bit too autonomously. Right. Right, because you sold everybody a bill of goods. The WEF, the globalists, the New World Order types, sold everybody a bill of goods. And the thing is, we also know that within that globalist structure, it was only designed for one reason. It was designed to keep people like you wealthy and powerful. And we don't want it, Mr. Carney. It's very simple. And I know the Canadian people, their elections are rigged the same way our elections are rigged, the same way the elections are rigged in Europe, because a lot of people, if the elections were true, these people wouldn't get elected dog catcher and nobody would give them power. But Joe, you got to help me with this guy Carney, because he's complaining that people in America, because that's who voted for Trump. 80 million people in America voted for Trump, okay, to do exactly what you just described, Mr. Carney, and you can't stand it.
What Mark Carney said there that is true is it is a rupture. I appreciate his candor. It is a rupture. And Howard Lutnick basically said the same thing. We are going in a different direction. Why? Because it doesn't work. But here's the deal. Canada, all the people in our chat room right now who are from Canada, he doesn't care that it doesn't work for you. You see, this is what people can't comprehend. And this is where the charlatans on the left in America, like AOC, like Bernie Sanders, who should be agreeing with us right now, yet they are supporters of WEF. Right. That should tell you who they really are.
Right.
Because this isn't about saving the environment. This is about feudalism. And Mark Carney is a disciple of that. You see, Justin Trudeau was a better politician. Mark Carney is a banker and a tried and true globalist. And he is executing on the rhetoric of Justin Trudeau, and he has destroyed you. And it's your job to vote him out, to educate your people. Mark Carney is absolutely a poison. But Joe, he's a true believer. And ultimately, Mark Carney, that was a declaration of war with the United States of America. And since that statement has been made, Donald Trump recently said that he is going to basically put 100% tariffs on Canadian goods. He also basically said in no uncertain terms that he will permit Canada partnering with China to work against the interests of America. And Douglas Ford, who we're going to talk about shortly, is echoing that, saying that Carney is out of his mind for basically saying these things and making this declaration of war, which it was. Ultimately, he's another one who is fully on board with an ideology. He is anti-human. He is anti-Canadian citizen. Get that through your head. That's what that statement is all about. And he means every bit of it, Joe Pasillo.
Well, listen, all you have to do is look at who he just partnered with. When you want to look at the gravest human rights abusive regime in the world, okay, go look at China. And he's willing to form this, I don't know what sort of an alliance it is. I don't know what the details would be, an alliance with China. Do you really think that's going to happen, Mr. Carney? Do you really think that Donald Trump and the American people are not going to understand, especially because social media now, with the message could get out there, whereas in the past it had to go through the mainstream elitists and at MSNBC and CNN, and now with social media. You think we're going to stand for that? No. And let me tell you something again. Carney doesn't care about the Canadian people. He'll blame Donald Trump if Donald Trump slaps 100% tariff on there, because China is going to look to move their goods into America through through Canada. And Donald Trump's going to slap 100% tariff on them, all right? And the Canadian people are going to suffer. And Mark Carney does not care. He's just going to get up there and he's going to blame Donald Trump and blame the Americans for using the leverage of tariffs. Right. Because tariffs work. Because tariffs can be used to fight against you, Mr. Oligarch. And it's you who are going to be the one that are going to be hurting the Canadian people. But you mentioned them, Joe. You mentioned Dougie Ford. Let's see what Dougie's got to say.
Sure, if President Trump wants Chinese spy vehicles coming across the border, but I'm betting the answer is no. You know, when you get on your cell phone, it's the Chinese that are going to be listening to your, and I'm not making this stuff up, they're going to be listening to your telephone conversation. I find it ironic that the Prime Minister is using a burner phone and all his staff over in China. But we're making a deal, it's Huawei 2.0, to come back into Canada, and we get nothing but potential job losses in our factories right across the board.
Hello, good morning. My name is Brian Kingston. I'm the president and CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association. Canada's auto industry is under enormous pressure, with over 90% of Canadian production destined for the United States. There is no industry without U.S. access and North American integration. Diversification is not an option for automotive, as markets in Europe and Asia are better served by assembly plants in those regions. Canada's market alone is too small to justify large-scale manufacturing. The future of Canada's auto industry and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that it supports depends on securing our trade relationship with the United States. The federal government's decision to open the Canadian market to Chinese EVs is deeply concerning. The Canada-China strategic partnership has the potential to undermine Canada's auto sector and presents risks to the future of our integrated North American automotive supply chain.
Now, I'm going to say this from a personal point of view. When my mother left Italy, she left Italy after her siblings. My mother stayed in Italy, but her siblings, her two older brothers and her sister, all went to Canada. Okay, so I have family in Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, in that area. Okay, they all worked in the auto industry. My Uncle Joe worked for Ford. Okay, my Uncle Tony worked for General Motors. Okay, my Uncle Benny. It was so, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I saw what Niagara Falls was like, Joe, from the time I was a little kid. Niagara Falls looked just like America. People woke up every day, went to work. A lot of them in the auto industry. Okay, they made good livings. They were union jobs. They provided for their families. They were able to thrive in Canada. Do you hear what Kingston just said? Did you hear what they're doing? Did you hear what this deal with China would do? Every one of those auto jobs, and it's already been decimated. It's just going to get decimated even more. Now, I'm not for a NAFTA type agreement. Okay, when I was young and stupid, I was. All right, but now I'm a little smarter as I get older. But I do think there should be access for Canada and Mexico, and there should be a trade agreement with a lot better protections for workers than, let's say, NAFTA afforded. But Kingston is right. Without America as a market for their cars, Joe, there is no auto industry in Canada. Who's going to be buying Canadian vehicles or vehicles that are manufactured in Canada? Without America, nobody. And who gets hurt? All those workers. Joe, I'll throw it over to you.
Mark Carney could care less. That is the whole thing. Mark Carney could care less, because then again, it's an ideology. It's not about you. And ultimately, he probably knew that. He's not dumb. He will just deflect, distract, and keep pushing forward. That is what he's about. He's a globalist. He does not care about those job losses. He cares about convincing a portion of those people to still vote for him. And that's what happens in America. When you're put on a plantation and you're convinced that somehow the government is on your side, when in fact they're not. This is anti-human. And to Doug Ford's credit, he stood behind that man. To his credit, I'll give credit. I'm no fan of Doug Ford.
He makes you laugh, though. He makes me laugh.
He does. I do want to go to the Ford Fest. I will say that. One day, maybe I'll be there. But anyway, at the end of the day, Doug Ford is at least bringing some common sense into this. Why, though? Because Doug Ford needs those votes, too. He's not going to let Mark Carney slit his throat. He needs those votes to stay in his seat. He has a big fat ass. He likes to sit in his seat, and he needs votes.
Right.
So he's basically, Mark Carney now is encroaching upon his interests. You see, that's how politics work, people. And that is exactly what's going on here. It's about reality. And it's about politicians distorting that reality. And frankly, Mark Carney is all about that distortion of reality. 100,000 votes, 100,000 jobs disappearing. Does he care? I say no. I don't think he does. That's collateral damage. Full steam ahead.
No, listen, when you said true believer earlier, it just reminds me of what we say here at the front line with Joe and Joe all the time. I believe there are a lot of true believers. I don't know what deludes them, working people, middle class people, into
What it
thinking
is,
that
I'll tell you what it is, Joe. They're not grounded in something that's higher than their identity in politics. It's political idolatry. You see, when you're grounded, listen, I have my political ideas. God is above them. God trumps all my political ideas. And I'm never going to have a politician that suits me completely until I go to heaven.
Right.
And the politician is God. He's the president. He's the king.
He's
so
the king.
ultimately here, you have to make choices and weigh them. But we're not grounded to anything anymore. We're unmoored. That's the underlying problem. And the identity has become God.
Right.
For the liberal. For the conservative, there's many conservative idolaters, many that basically will disregard a belief that's much deeper or higher for a political game. Now, as far as these elitists, like they worship power. That's their God, and they'll say and do anything for it at your expense. The game is distraction.
Let me tell you something, and you know who's waking up to, you use the right words, at your expense. I'm really, really hoping that we hear more people talking about this clip that we're about to play, because a lot of the left-wing agenda in America, see, E. Michael Jones makes a good point. In other words, when you talk about like a lot of these elitists and these groups that really just want control, they want to control everything. They need proxy warriors. Okay, so at one point in the not so distant past, one of the greatest proxy warrior groups in America were African Americans. Well, they're waking up too.
Line is when Joe Biden got elected, he said he wanted to fast track 4 million undocumented residents to full citizenship. Black people completely ignored it. I spoke on it. I said, do you know why he want to fast track 4 million? Because he know he not going to do nothing for us. We ain't going to be motivated to vote for him November. So what he's going to do is have these migrants already set up with citizenship so they can replace the black vote that he loses. The migrants are being put in our communities on purpose, New York and Chicago on purpose, because they are what? The two blackest cities in America. They're the two largest cities in America. They're the two most politically conscious black communities in America. So if we can wash out the black with the brown in New York, if we can wash out the black with the brown in Chicago, Philly don't stand a chance. Atlanta don't stand a chance. LA, Houston, Dallas, Detroit, Chicago don't stand a chance. The migrants are here for 3 reasons. Replace us at the polls, replace us at the low-end industry jobs.
He gets it, Joe. That is, Joe.
Now,
that
he has
dude
said things in the past
it.
that make me cringe, okay? I find him to be a bit of a radical, but what he, again, this because I can put down ideological blinders and listen to another human being and what they're saying. What he just said has the Democrats shaking in their boots. Because this guy is not a conservative. He is not a conservative black man. What he is, though, he seems to have his head on straight when it comes to how black Americans are being used. He might still not like Republicans or Trump. But when he looks at the Democrats and Joe Biden, as he described, he said, well, you're trying to replace us. Then he's got to say to himself, well, we're going to have to do something because they're replacing us. We've given them our votes for decades. And now they're going to turn around because we're not putting our chains back on, okay, and just shutting up. They're going to look to replace us. Democrats fear that guy. But here's my thing. That guy, Republicans better get it through their heads. He's a guy you could talk to. But you can't talk to, and I would tell this to all the Republicans, Chamber of Commerce people, and everything. Stop selling us the globalist line from the right, the elitist line from the right. You better start addressing the needs of everyday people. That guy is talking about everyday black Americans getting used by Democrats, and now because they're not falling in line the way they're supposed to and be a good little black person, okay, they're going to get kicked to the curb by bringing in all these immigrants. So he's got it right.
Joe, that is reality, what he said. And we've been talking about it to our credit for quite some time. We've been bringing voices on the street, in town halls, saying the exact same thing. He just has a larger platform. And I'll tell you this, if the populist movement could shave 1 in 3 African Americans in inner cities to that mindset, the leftists will never win again, ever.
Right.
And that is exactly why, and this is part of the conversation and my frustration with the people who have such a problem with Donald Trump and his migrant policy. Don't you realize why Joe Biden did what he did? He did this at the expense of the poor in cities. This is my complaint with the United States bishops. You did not say a word when the border was opened and people were getting raped at the border. Children were getting trafficked, and the poor in inner cities were basically having their wages driven down and their rents driven up. That man is saying it. Where was the voice when this was going on? Nothing. And now that they created this mess, everyone's in an uproar. Okay, maybe Donald Trump's methods should be looked at and reviewed. However, the mess was created for a political reason, and it's to replace the unreliable Latin American and Black vote, which they counted on for decades. And you say, no, Joe, that's not true. Look at the vote which just took place. Almost 50% of the Latino vote voted for Donald Trump. 1 in 5 African-American males voted for Donald Trump. That's only going to increase. So what do? They knew this. Bring in people. This is what happened to Catholics in inner cities. Read the book, The Slaughter of Cities by E. Michael Jones. The Catholic voting bloc was too strong. So what did the leftists do? They brought in poor Southern blacks and basically put them on welfare for 5 decades. And now those people are not reliable anymore. Don't take my word for it. Listen to that man.
Right.
So what are they doing? They're replacing them. And you are supporting a group of people who are, again, slitting your throat. They have no interest. None of your interests are basically supporting. Are they for you? Not at all. Joe, it blows my mind how people, it really does. It's schizophrenic. It's schizophrenic, and it's sad.
Listen, no, it is sad. What's not sad, Joe and I started doing this show back in 2018 because our view was we think we have something to say. We think that we've had our consciousness raised by other people who are a lot smarter than us, and we should have a show because we have a lot to say about these things. And our goal is to just help to try to people raise their consciousness. You don't have to agree with us on everything, nor do I expect that you will. But what you do have to do is like that guy who, like I said, he's a black radical. He has said things about so-called white people that I can't stand. But on that point, he is 1,000% right. And black people maybe need to listen to that. You need to take off your chains. And I'm sorry, if you think somebody, because they have an R at the end of their name, in other words, Republican or conservative, or they voted for Donald Trump, or because the color of this happens to be different than yours, if you think that I'm your enemy, I'm not your enemy because I don't want you in chains. Joe Rossinello doesn't want you in chains. That man that we just played does not want you in chains. The Democrat Party wants you in chains. Barack Obama has said, well, you know, the problem is the brothers ain't coming out to vote for Kamala. Right, because they're tired of you, Barry. They're tired of you, Barry. They don't want to hear you anymore, Barry. They know you're full of crap, Barry. And they knew damn well Kamala was. They knew she was full of crap because she couldn't put 2 sentences together. Oh, Biden couldn't do it because Biden's friggin' lost in his brain, and Kamala couldn't put 2 sentences together because she ain't smart enough. Okay? And guys like this say, you know what? These sons of bitches, they hate us. We supported them for all this time, and they turn around and they're going to replace us. Did you remember something about the left, Joe? They love black people as long as black people are compliant. They love Hispanics as long as Hispanic people are compliant. They love white people too, so-called white people too, as long as those white people hate themselves. That's what the left loves. They love people who have no problem destroying their own communities. They have no problem with people who experience self-loathing. In fact, the left tries to instill in you that you need to hate yourself simply because of the accident of birth that you happen to have skin that's white. And that's a whole talk about racial and ethnic identity. America is a time for a conversation for for another day. But yeah, so let's hope people keep waking up, Joe, especially to what the Democrat Party in particular, and in particular in blue states, have done to the African American community. So let's talk a little. We're going to end the show. We have a few minutes. Let's talk about Vladimir Zelensky.
I keep asking if I have time. Do I have time to tell the Zelensky story? Sure. Because it's another one. It's just, what is Zelensky? In America, he's a hero. He's a real warrior. He's got that nice green, warrior suit on. And here's the truth. And people know parts of this story, but they don't know it in its cleanest narrative. So he was a totally apolitical. He was an outsider to politics, zero experience or interest in government or politics. He was a comedian and with no manifesto, no party ties. And he does a TV show, a planned TV show called Servant of the People. And the main character in the show does a YouTube video that calls out oligarchs and corruption and eventually becomes popular and is drafted as a protest candidate and eventually becomes president. So Zelensky played on a TV show a person who becomes president by popular demand. In real life, the TV show is supported by an oligarch named Kolomoisky, who owned the TV channel. And Kolomoisky did a huge nonstop promo on that TV show to make it the #1 show. Primetime slots and ads everywhere and crossovers with the news and what have you. 2018, a year before the show goes off the air, Zelensky forms a political party called Servant of the People, the same title as the show. And in no press release, secretly done, and then he does another season of the show. And in April of 2019, he announces his actual candidacy on Instagram. He has no campaign, no rallies, no real platform. He skips the presidential debates. Others attended. He avoids press conferences, and the few that he did were in the beginning were really bad. And Kolomoisky's TV channel gave Zelensky's campaign endless airtime and favorable polls and went after his enemies. The U.S. intelligence agencies, CIA and NSA, helped, U.S. spending $5 billion, by the way, on democracy campaigns in Ukraine, funneled through NGOs. And USAID embeds advisors in his organization to help with the campaign. I'm almost done. And on Election Day, Zelensky wins with 73% of the vote. And then the war happens with Russia, and he declares martial law, and he ends elections. They're supposed to be elected.
That's all you need to see. And the fact is, all that whole apparatus that was set up that the gentleman was describing on the Joe Rogan show, but then you also have the cherry on that Sunday is then the CIA obviously stepped in, and they made sure that Zelensky was going to be in power. And why? It goes back to the original conversation. NATO and their goals, their globalist goals, they needed to make sure that they could force a war with Russia. They've been doing it for decades. Say on the show, I'll say it till the day I die. This is not Putin's war. NATO caused this war. NATO caused 1 million deaths. NATO did this to the Ukraine. You can't blame a leader of a country. I don't care if it's Kim Jong-il. I don't care if it's Kim Jong-un. Okay, excuse me. All right, I don't care. I don't care if it was Joseph Stalin. Okay, the fact is that any leader is going to do what's in their national interest, and Putin was doing what was in the interest of the Russian of his country, of Russia. And NATO just kept going up to the line, and they needed a puppet. The CIA, which is globalist, E. Michael Jones, going back to him again, he'll tell you all about the CIA, okay? Just like they've done in so many parts of the world since the end of World War II, okay? They went in there and they made sure Zelensky was installed as a puppet. We've said before, he's a homosexual, he's an actor, he is he's never had any experience, okay? He was put there so that he could be a puppet for those who want to perpetuate this war. That's what it is. And it really needs to come to an end. I'm hoping that it does. Ostensibly, there's been some progress there. We shouldn't give any more money.
Oh,
we shouldn't
not
give it any more money. But he hit the nail on the head. It's a CIA operation. And NATO is at fault for doing all this. They caused this war in the Ukraine. They're the ones that need to do something to end this war, not just the United States.
Ultimately, the reason why a lot of Americans don't understand what's really going on in the Ukraine, because they're only looking at a certain period of time. There was an agreement. It was called the Minsk Agreement. Basically, what that agreement said was it was between Russia and NATO, and it said that Ukraine is off limits. Ukraine could not move east. Well, the Soviet Union collapsed, and believe it or not, Vladimir Putin asked to be in the NATO, and George W. Bush turned him down. Why did he turn him down? Now, we're going way back now, people, not just at the point when Vladimir Putin went into Ukraine. Why did he turn him down? Because America and NATO thought Russia was weak. As the statement went, they're nothing more than a parking lot with gas. That was who said that? The dude who ran for McCain. McCain. That was his famous statement. They're nothing more than a parking lot that has a gas station on it. Well, wrong. Because they thought Russia was weak. So they broke the Minsk Agreement and they created a coup, NATO. And that man just laid out the puppet that they put in place to basically further NATO's aims. What were the aims? Take down Russia. They were the aggressor. NATO was the aggressor, and Zelensky was nothing more than a puppet. In the meantime, 1 million people are dead, and America paid for a lot of it.
That's right. Thank you, Lindsey Graham.
America, our money, while in this country, there are people who are working 60 hours a week and don't have benefits. There are people who can't put food on the table in the middle of our country. And we saw fit to give all this money away to a corrupt nation. How much money went into people's pockets? The graft that went on, that's our money. Why would we support that? Why would anyone vote for that? And that is what the American First Movement's about. And frankly, Donald Trump hasn't fully embraced that movement either. And I want it to go a lot further. I am not for forever wars. It's anti-people. It's anti-taxpayer. It does us no good, Joe Pasillo.
No, I agree.
Nothing. It's our money. And that is what happened.
If real quick, do you think that like everything going on with Carney and China, it strikes me there are some parallels. They're goading us the same way that NATO. They kept poking Putin. They kept moving the line, moving the goalpost closer and closer to the Russian border. Aren't we in a similar situation? Maybe I'm completely off, okay? I'm not a geopolitical guru, but aren't we in a similar situation if China blatantly allies themselves with Canada and on our border tries to enforce what China wants to do? And kind of be a check on us and encroach on us a bit. Joe, I'll throw it over to you for the final word.
What I would say is this: just as Russia did not permit the Ukraine to go along with NATO, we would never permit that to happen. There is no. I would even say it could be a president that is far left. Because the military-industrial complex sadly doesn't answer to the President of the United States. The State Department doesn't answer to the President of the United States. And no matter who the president is, it seems that America is forever in war. Mm-hmm. No matter what the people say. There is no way America would be for that. And that's what Dougie Ford, to a degree, alluded to when he said, do you actually think that Donald Trump is going to tolerate, or any president for that matter? That's where Mark Carney is delusional. He has a mind virus like Rosie O'Donnell. He has a mind virus.
Did you have to mention Rosie O'Donnell?
No, but she's another one who has a mind virus.
Yeah,
You're not thinking clearly that you would think that America would tolerate that. And Donald Trump has already made a statement. He's going to put 100% tariffs on all goods. You declared war on a neighbor, which you need.
Right.
You need. Again, ideology over people. Do you think the Cuban government cares about the Cuban people when there's basically embargoes put on goods? Do you think the Iranian government cares about the Iranian people? No. Well, the Canadian government does not care about the Canadian people. When you make a statement like that, and you think that the America isn't going to react in a radical way because Carney's statement was very radical, you're not living in reality. And that's for the people of Canada to get him out.
Oh, yeah. No, and listen, if you want to live in reality, you got to visit the front line with Joe and Joe every Sunday because that's where we are. We're living in reality. We don't have ideological blinders. We're not Donald Trump sycophants. I'll listen to the left if they have something good to say. So will Joe. We want good ideas. We want ideas that are going to benefit everyday people, not Carney, not Larry Fink, not the elites in America or in Hollywood or whatever. We live in reality. The reality is we're getting trampled underfoot. The reality is that we have to fight back. Right now, at this moment in history, the greatest weapon we have is social media. Because it's a pure, free marketplace. It's not controlled. Even the oligarchs at Google and Facebook backed down. In other words, when they got busted colluding with the government to try to silence voices during COVID. Okay, this is our biggest weapon, is information and making sure people have it. Why? Because Joe and Joe know everything? No, we don't know everything. But we're sincere, and we want the best for people. So we have to sift through these ideas, stimulate a conversation like many are out there, and let's create some sort of powerful movement, both in Canada and America, okay, where we fight back against these people. Donald Trump's not going to be the savior. It's got to transcend him, all right, and we're going to just keep doing our part to make sure that we let these globalists know we're not taking this laying down. We're going to fight tooth and nail and right to the bitter end. So thanks for joining us. Please share this video. Please share all our videos. Again, if you like, if you're here, I assume it's because you like us. And if you like us, share our videos. Help us get out to a wider audience. Like them, share them, subscribe to our channel on Facebook, YouTube, and X, and anywhere you see us. Help us out. Thank you again. We'll see you next week. And remember till then that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going